Hello and welcome to Epiphanies with Ilango. This is James Morrison. So I'm just going to switch gears a bit, James. This is on the state actors conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And how do companies react to, of course, we spoke about how do we protect, what are the things that we do. How do I know I've been hit by a state actor? And if I'm hit by a state actor, what the hell do I do? Because I don't have the resources at all. However, I could be Facebook and still I can't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's make sure we break down the criminal actors we're talking about, right? State versus criminal. 95% of what you want to protect against is going to be on the criminal side. That and that protection, these guys are not, and women are not that good. They are some that are great. Don't get me wrong, and I don't want to challenge some of them to come after me.
You want to be careful. You don't want to.
That's what happened with Sony. So Sony, when they got hit, one of their guys on their entertainment side apparently made a comment like that, and so some hacker got really torqued off at him and came after him. I mean, there's some great ones. Don't get me wrong, but in general, a lot of the criminal groups that are operating in countries, like Nigeria, India, Pakistan, Vietnam, some of those places, they're buying the software. They're going on the dark web and they're purchasing that software. That's who you really want to protect yourself against. You want to make sure you have ransomware prevention and ransomware recovery built in, because 95% of the companies in the world are never going to have a nation state in their business. They're just not. They aren't big enough. But small and medium businesses in particular are going to find themselves hit by that. The other problem is from a nation state is we look at things like NotPetya, where the NotPetya ransomware wasn't aimed at individual businesses. It was intended to be aimed at largers, but it hit companies like Maersk and really did like $400-500 million of damage to Maersk. If you get hit with a nation state actor, I'll tell you the best thing you can do right away is unplug your internet. I know it sounds completely whatever, but you have got to eliminate that access as soon as possible. But that's why an intrusion response plan is important. If a Russian hacker got into your system, they would be able to gain sysadmin rights within 12 minutes. I think that's the number I heard. They're tremendous. The Russian actors are fantastic. They know what they're doing. They're the best in the world, and they've been doing it.
I see what you're doing now. Any Russian hackers listening to us, you're making sure they don't come
after me, man. I'm showing you some respect, right? The Chinese hackers are probably the second, best in the world. I mean, United States are really good, and outside of like Israelis are really good. But the Chinese groups, they're going to take a little longer. It may take them as long as 24 hours to get in your network and start to move around. And
you're setting some SLAs for hackers now. 24 hours now. You got to get to.
Yeah. So exactly. I promise to have sysadmin rights by 12 minutes. I'm going to beat that FBI guy's thing, right? And then beyond that, so then we have what I call the second tier, groups. And Iran is moving itself into being a first tier. I mean, they've been around for a while doing a lot of work. But Iran, North Korea, they're going to take a little while too. They may take 36 to 48 hours. That's why sometimes what I've said is that, and I said this earlier, disconnecting your internet, if you think you've got a major, like a really deep breach in there, that might be your answer. But you need to have that plan in place. And you need to have support of your management when that occurs. I would also say one thing of cyber insurance is that you want to have an incident response company on retainer. If you are a medium or large businesses in particular, you want to have somebody like CrowdStrike, somebody like Mandiant, somebody like Kroll. I have a ton of friends that work at Kroll, and you want to have them on retainer so that when you see the first indications of compromise, you call them and say, yo, I'm seeing X, Y, and Z. And they're going to say, you know what, that's a state actor. Get him out, turn it off. They're going to give you that initial response based upon the data that you're able to provide them. So that's why I think it's just the world we live in. Most companies have a lawyer on retainer, right? It's time to also make sure we have a cyber incident response company on retainer.
No, I agree. I think it's going to become, at least I wasn't around when we had to have lawyers for everything else, but it's become a habit. My son got into trouble in school and he said, can we speak to the lawyer uncle of ours? And I said, no, you go figure out how to manage it. I'm not going to start this at school.
Well, in the
So
United
maybe we
States, we
should
lawyer up. I mean, we have the highest lawyer per capita in the world, and people will lawyer up in a heartbeat. And so it's amazing to me when you find somebody who when we talk about cyber, why don't you have you have probably a legal whatever, but having an incident response company, it saves you money. Statistically, if you have an incident response company on retainer, it will save you over $1 million in that first response. So I think that's one of the things I would do is make sure your cyber insurance is up. Talk to the cyber insurance provider because they often have companies that they want you to use. And you can actually void your policy if you're not using a company that's on their approved list.
Thanks for that, James. And I think what you made a pertinent point, right? There's a lot of headline news about state actors, but only maybe 5% of us will get hit, and that's really the big guys. And like NotPetya, it could be a incidental, non-intended victim. But I think the other piece that you said, which I found really relevant amongst everything, was that whole ransomware protection and ransomware recovery. Emphasis runs a service called IT 911, where customers call us after the breach for recovery, not for forensics or for everything else. And we do this quite regularly. Guess what? We find that people haven't managed their backup and restore, that their word processes are not done well. They have not isolated. They're probably sitting in the same stack. So I think getting some of those basics right itself could save a lot of companies the grief that they will face.
75% of backups fail when you need them. That's a crazy statistic. That means that people have done they have their IT person doing their backups, and I hate to say it, I've been there. Their IT person didn't know what they were doing. It's the first time they've ever set up that system, and it's not set up right. Or this is more likely, the data that they're backing up isn't enough data to actually bring your company back online, because you haven't identified what data is so crucially important. And then also the criminals are going to go after your backups. And so I mean, when we had this, when the municipalities got hit a couple years ago here in East Texas, I went out to one of them, and they had their backups on a general hard drive, system like a Buffalo drive. And when the hacker went in, they encrypted those too. So they didn't, in the military, we had the 3-2-1 rule. You had 3 backups, 2 different mediums, 1 was stored in an offsite. If you had 1 backup that was stored someplace else, and what was interesting was in this particular municipality, the tax office actually had 2 backup drives, and they alternated those backup drives. So they had another backup, but the city itself didn't.
Yeah. No, so, like 3-1.
Yeah.
Just wait till your CFO gets to the 3-1. He says, that's too much. You got to cut the one that's offsite anyway. You haven't used it for the. One advice that I give companies is make sure your CFO's not involved in the CISO conversations.
I mean, SolarWinds. The rumor on SolarWinds is that they outsourced their software development because the CFO wanted to save money and have the software developed in Eastern Europe. You can't make security.
So let me make a very controversial statement that every company is going to kill me for. But in the true spirit of being with the FBI agent, I'm going to say this. CFOs are your biggest enemies for security if you let them drive a cost angle here. I'm not saying go crazy and extravagant, but if CFOs are watching this, I'd urge you to think about this not as optimization, but as protection for the future.
I'll tell you another one this is another controversial statement, so I'll put myself on the hook. This one. The security officer should not report to the CIO.
And why would you say that? That's the first time I'm hearing this.
Security should be outside of the CIO's purview. It should be directly to the CEO or to a chief risk officer. Security is a risk. Security is not an IT question. It's a risk question. And I get people all the time saying, well, but my CIO wants to see the report. Exactly. If I write a report, if I'm the CISO and I write this report that says we're in trouble, guess what's going to happen politically? You know what can happen. I'm not saying all CIOs do this, but some CIO is going to go, I'm not putting this report up there because it says I haven't done any work over the last 3 years and we're more insecure today than we were 3 years ago. So I've always
said, anyway, we've angered the CFOs. Let's anger the CIOs too.
Absolutely.
It's like the fox keeping the hen pen. I mean, I know I exaggerated a bit, but
it's we have to accept that security, the truth of security, has to be offered to the board of directors or board to the executives without filtering. It has to, we have to do that. And I know it's not politically nice, and I'm not really an executive, but security officers are not going to do their job great unless they know that they're going to be able to get their report through unfiltered. And I can tell you a bureau story about this. We had our security officer who reported some security breaches to one of our assistant special agents in charge, and that assistant said, "You know what? I don't think this is important." So it wasn't forwarded. And guess what happened? That security breach, we suffered that exact issue like a month later. And the SAC, which is like our CEO for our office, came back and said, "Why wasn't I notified?" And the security officer kind of sat there, wasn't going to, and the assistant wasn't going to say anything. And so finally someone on the side said, "We submitted that report." And it slowly, they realized that this assistant, the CIO, had kept it away from the we can't protect it. We're not doing ourselves any favors, and we're entering a world where compliance is going to become more of our reality. For example, Sarbanes-Oxley now requires financial companies to report cybersecurity and those risks. But I believe that a time's coming where we're going to see Sarbanes-Oxley pushed into other sectors. I think healthcare is going to be one that we may see sooner than later. Unfortunately, the number of healthcare attacks in 2020 went way up, mainly because of COVID and because of COVID research.
No, thank you for that, hey James. I said we started this to be a epiphany and a freewheeling conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I hope you did. I'm sure our listeners will. Is just as I know you're still with HPE, are you, James? So which means if people want to talk to you, how do they talk to you? I mean, there's a wealth of knowledge, and I'll tell you the big piece that I found useful is if you've written code in COBOL Basic, when today people configure, that time you really wrote, and Unix. Yeah. So and you've been up through the ranks, so you kind of understand what's going to happen when somebody breaks in, right? How do people get in touch with you?
So two ways. So as an HPE employee, my email address is james.m.morrison@hpe.com. Also, I do cyber education. That is a job I do on the side through Texas Cyber Guy. So my email address is mail@txcyberguy.com. And I do this as a service. I do presentations for businesses. I do presentations like Fidelity has me doing presentations for their customers because scams are a big thing. We're seeing a ton of scams focused around, the elderly. I do online safety presentations for teenagers and young adults, and I just think that we have to start having these conversations, and that's kind of, I guess, my mission is to talk to as many people. And I want people not to say, "Oh my God, he knows what he's talking about cybersecurity." It's like, that guy scared me. There we go. Fear can motivate us to make change. And that's my goal, is to start changing the way we do business.
I agree. And building a safer workplace and a safer world.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that, James. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Me
Much
too.
appreciated time. I can think of 6 different episode shoots from here, right? From your time at the Navy to many things that we spoke.
I have to say Air Force, wasn't Navy. I have to say Air Force. Navy was
Navy was your colleague who learned Unix with you. Sorry. It was a colleague who learned Unix with you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Very grateful.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And if you need anything, you know where I'm at.
Will do. And for our listeners, you heard James Morrison. You have his details. We'll make sure we put it down on the links. Reach out to him if you need anything. And if you want to talk to somebody at Emphasis, reach out to us too. Have a great rest of the day, evening, wherever you're listening from.